Let me tell you something that will shake the foundations of your thinking. The most dangerous woman on earth is not the one with power, position, or possessions. It is the woman who no longer needs your applause to breathe. She doesn't need your likes to feel seen. She doesn't need your presence to feel whole. Why? Because she has tapped into a source that the world didn't give her, and therefore the world can't take away. She has stepped out of the prison of people's opinions. And let me say this, the greatest prison on earth is not made of iron and concrete. It is made of the need to be accepted, to be validated, to be acknowledged. But the moment a woman walks out of that invisible cell, she becomes a weapon in the hand of God. You can't manipulate her, you can't control her, you can't buy her, because she's already been bought by purpose. You see, validation is the currency of the insecure. When you don't know who you are, you need someone else to tell you what you're worth. But when God gives you a revelation of your identity, you no longer ask the mirror, the man, or the masses for confirmation. You walk in quiet confidence. You walk in divine clarity. That is danger, not to the world, but to the systems of control that have fed off your neediness. There is a transformation that happens when a woman stops needing to be chosen. She starts choosing herself. She starts performing for love and starts producing from love. She stops waiting to be seen and begins to see. She doesn't hustle for a seat at the table. She builds her own, and then she invites only those who match her value, not her voice. Let me teach you a principle. Detachment is not rebellion, it's realignment. When God begins to call you deeper, he will disconnect you from the shallow. And some of you are suffering because you're still trying to validate what God already confirmed. You're still checking for applause from people who haven't even clapped for themselves. The dangerous woman has been through the fire of loneliness. She has walked through rejection. She has tasted betrayal, but none of it broke her. It refined her. And now she doesn't cry for being left out. She thanks God for being set apart. Because when you are set apart, you don't blend in. You don't settle. You don't chase. You build, you create, you birth. And here's the truth. When you no longer need validation, you become a vision, a walking embodiment of divine intent. The enemy doesn't fear your beauty. He fears your clarity. Because when a woman knows who she is, hell gets nervous. When a woman stops asking, am I enough, and starts declaring, I was born for this, the game changes. You are not here to impress. You are here to impact. And that impact begins the moment you detach from needing to be seen and attached to the one who saw you before the foundation of the world. When you know you are already approved by heaven, you stop auditioning for earth. That is the posture of the dangerous woman. And I'll tell you this, that kind of woman doesn't chase opportunities. Opportunities chase her. She doesn't beg for love, she attracts it. She doesn't compete, she completes. And above all, she doesn't panic because she is planted, rooted, anchored, built on revelation, not reaction. So don't be surprised when people can't handle you anymore. You were never created to fit into their limitations. Your detachment is not arrogance, it's assignment. It's divine separation for divine elevation. You are not hard to love, you're just hard to fool now. You are not difficult, you're just discerning. And when you become that kind of woman, you don't just live, you lead. You don't just exist, you establish. You don't just inspire, you ignite. A woman who no longer needs validation has discovered her identity in God, not in man. This is not just a change of attitude, it is a deep spiritual awakening. When a woman finds her identity in God, she no longer builds her worth on shifting sand. She no longer depends on compliments, attention, or relationships to feel complete. Instead, she roots herself in the truth that she was fearfully and wonderfully made by the creator of the universe. Her value is not assigned by human perception, but ordained by divine purpose. She knows she was created with intention, and because of that, she is no longer enslaved by the fear of being overlooked. Man's validation is often inconsistent, conditional, and temporary. It is based on performance, appearance, or usefulness. But when a woman anchors her identity in God, she no longer seeks approval from a world that didn't create her. She becomes unshaken by rejection because she knows she was accepted before she was born. She understands that her worth was spoken by God, not voted by people. She stops performing for validation and begins to live from revelation. That revelation gives her dignity, wisdom, and peace. This kind of woman doesn't crumble when she's criticized, and she doesn't inflate when she's praised. Her heart is steady because it is hidden in God. She understands that the applause of people is fleeting, but the approval of God is eternal. And in that revelation, she becomes dangerous because you can't manipulate her, intimidate her, or distract her. She's no longer available for emotional bargaining or spiritual compromise. She walks with boldness, not because of ego, but because of alignment. When a woman knows who she is in God, she doesn't need to be reminded by man. She walks as a reminder to the world of who God is. Validation becomes irrelevant when a woman understands her assignment and purpose. Once she taps into the divine reason for her existence, external opinions lose their grip on her soul. She's no longer waiting to be told she's worthy because she's too busy doing the very thing she was born to do. Purpose silences the noise of the crowd. It quiets the anxiety that comes from comparison. It dissolves the craving for affirmation because her life is being driven by something far greater than approval. It is being driven by vision. When a woman discovers her assignment, she stops looking around and starts looking within. She realizes that she wasn't created to fit in, she was created to fulfill. And fulfillment never comes from applause, it comes from alignment. That alignment with her purpose becomes her fuel. She rises early not because someone is watching, but because destiny is calling. She stays focused not because she's trying to prove anything, but because she's walking in divine timing. The opinions of others no longer guide her steps because her steps have been ordered by the Lord. Many women are exhausted today because they are living for validation rather than from vision. But the moment purpose is discovered, peace follows, direction replaces doubt, confidence is birthed, not arrogance, but assurance. That assurance makes her dangerous because she becomes immune to emotional manipulation. You can no longer guilt her into silence or flatter her into distraction. She's anchored in something eternal. She's moving by instruction, not reaction. When she knows what she was born to do, she becomes unavailable for anything that threatens it. She is no longer living for recognition. She becomes the evidence of God's intention on the earth. And when that happens, validation is not just unnecessary, it becomes completely irrelevant. Emotional detachment is not coldness, it is clarity of mind and protection of destiny. Many misunderstand a detached woman as being aloof, heartless, or withdrawn. But in truth, emotional detachment, when birthed by wisdom and not by trauma, is a spiritual discipline. It is the result of maturity, not bitterness. It is not a lack of love, but a repositioning of energy. A woman who has learned to detach emotionally is simply refusing to be entangled in distractions that threaten her peace, her purpose, and her progress. She has discerned that not every battle requires her presence, not every opinion deserves her response, and not every emotion must be entertained. Emotional detachment is clarity. It is the ability to see what is happening without becoming what is happening. It is strength under control. It is choosing stillness over chaos, purpose over pain, and wisdom over reaction. She does not detach because she doesn't feel. She detaches because she refuses to drown in feelings that do not lead to growth. This woman has learned that her destiny is too valuable to be compromised by emotional entanglements. She no longer allows the guilt of others to manipulate her decisions, nor does she absorb the toxicity of those who refuse to heal. Her boundaries are not walls, they are gates. She knows when to open and when to close. She listens deeply, loves purely, but moves wisely. This emotional clarity empowers her to move in alignment with divine timing. She is not rushed by fear or stalled by sentiment. She discerns seasons and respects cycles. Her silence is not void, it is vision. Her distance is not rejection, it is preservation. And because of this clarity, she becomes a woman of depth, discernment, and divine discipline, protected not by force, but by wisdom. Needing approval is a symptom of misplaced identity and undeveloped self-worth. When a woman does not truly know who she is, she begins to seek that definition in the eyes of others. She becomes dependent on external validation to feel secure, beautiful, capable, and loved. But the tragedy is this: the more she depends on others to define her, the more disconnected she becomes from the truth of who she really is. Approval addiction is not just emotional, it is spiritual. It reveals that a woman has not yet rooted her identity in the unchanging word of her Creator. Without a strong foundation of self-worth, she becomes vulnerable to manipulation, praise, and rejection. She begins to believe that her value rises and falls with people's opinions. She becomes a slave to performance, constantly adjusting her voice, her actions, even her dreams, just to be accepted. And yet, no matter how much approval she gathers, it never fills the void. Because approval from man was never meant to replace affirmation from God. When a woman doesn't know her worth, she negotiates with her destiny. She compromises her standards to be liked. She silences her voice to keep the peace. She shrinks herself to fit in rooms she was meant to redesign. But the moment she reconnects with her true identity, when she begins to see herself through the eyes of the one who made her, everything changes. She stops asking, "Do they like me?" and starts declaring, "This is who I am." She no longer seeks mirrors in people's eyes. She becomes the mirror. She reflects truth. She reflects strength. And most of all, she reflects the image of God. That revelation shatters the craving for approval because it reveals something greater: the unwavering acceptance of heaven. The most dangerous woman is the one who no longer waits for permission to become. She no longer pauses her progress for someone else's validation or affirmation. She has broken free from the mindset that tells her she must be chosen before she can begin, approved before she can move, or supported before she can rise. This woman understands that her calling is not a conference decision. It was decided in eternity. And because of that, she gives herself permission to become everything she was created to be. Waiting for permission is a silent killer of destiny. It keeps women bound to people's timelines, dependent on human support, and paralyzed by fear of judgment. But the woman who stops waiting unlocks a different realm of authority. She stops saying, "Can I?" and starts declaring, "I will." She doesn't ask, "Am I ready?" because she understands that readiness is not a feeling, it is a decision. She stops standing in the hallway of potential and walks through the door of purpose. This woman no longer seeks to be understood before she acts. She acts and lets the fruit speak. She no longer delays her obedience to God because of the silence of people. She trusts that divine instruction is enough. She doesn't need applause to move forward. She doesn't need agreement to be effective. What she has is vision, faith, and clarity. And those three are enough to birth nations, shift atmospheres, and rewrite legacies. The woman who stops waiting becomes a builder, a voice, a light. She pioneers because she understands that the permission she was waiting for was already written in her DNA. When she says yes to her calling without waiting for others to say yes to her, she becomes a force the world cannot ignore. True strength is the ability to walk alone without losing direction. A woman who possesses this kind of strength is not led by crowds, companionship, or constant reassurance. She is led by conviction. She is led by divine instruction. She understands that solitude is not abandonment, it is refinement. It is in the quiet path that her roots grow deep, her spirit sharpens, and her clarity becomes unshakable. She does not fear the silence because she knows God often speaks the loudest when everything else is quiet. The ability to walk alone is a sign of maturity. It means she no longer needs external company to feel valuable or visible. It means her inner compass is working. Her values, her standards, her assignment are intact. She doesn't follow the crowd because the crowd does not know her destination. She is not swayed by trends or distracted by noise because she is anchored in something eternal. This kind of strength is not developed in comfort. It is birthed in seasons where she had to keep moving even when no one was cheering. She understands that the path to greatness is often lonely. But she also knows that loneliness is not emptiness. It is preparation. It is in those alone moments where her confidence is purified from ego and her motives are tested by fire. She learns how to think without confusion, how to stand without applause, and how to trust God when everything around her is uncertain. This strength is dangerous because it cannot be shaken by isolation. A woman who can walk alone is a woman who is no longer held hostage by fear of rejection. She knows who she is. She knows where she's going, and she refuses to compromise her direction just to feel accompanied. Her footsteps may echo in empty halls, but they are steps of purpose, not panic. Detachment from external affirmation leads to divine alignment and inner stability. When a woman releases her dependence on constant validation from people, she steps into a realm of spiritual clarity where her identity is no longer tied to opinions, applause, or approval. She stops adjusting herself based on how others perceive her and starts aligning herself with how God designed her. This shift doesn't make her arrogant, it makes her stable. She's no longer up one day and down the next, swayed by compliments or crushed by criticism. She is rooted, grounded, and centered in something unshakable. External affirmation, while pleasant, is fleeting. It is based on mood, perception, and bias. But divine alignment is eternal. It is based on truth, destiny, and purpose. When a woman detaches from the need to be seen, she becomes more aware of being sent. Her movements are no longer dictated by how many people are watching, but by how clearly she hears the voice of God. She becomes focused, undistracted, and intentional. This detachment is a form of protection. It guards her from the highs and lows of emotional instability that come from trying to please everyone. It shields her from burnout because she no longer performs for applause. It protects her from identity theft because her sense of self is no longer outsourced to others. She is not cold, she is clear. She is not distant, she is discerning. She no longer runs to prove herself because she understands she has already been approved in the courts of heaven. With this detachment comes peace, a peace that cannot be shaken by rejection or inflated by recognition. She walks in consistency, lives with integrity, and serves with purity. Because when a woman no longer craves the world's affirmation, she becomes fully available for divine instruction. When a woman no longer craves applause, she becomes unstoppable in her assignment. The hunger for recognition is often the very thing that slows a woman down, because she starts performing instead of producing. She begins to measure her impact by how many people clap instead of how much fruit she bears. But when she breaks free from that craving, when she no longer needs to be noticed, applauded, or celebrated, she steps into a level of power and focus that cannot be touched by distraction or delay. This woman doesn't work to be admired. She works because she is anointed. She doesn't move to be seen. She moves because she is sent. Her actions are no longer a response to the crowd, but obedience to the calling. That kind of obedience releases authority. It allows her to build what others only dream about, because she's not spending her energy trying to impress. She's investing her energy in impact. When applause is no longer her fuel, purpose becomes her engine. She doesn't need stage lights to validate her value, because she knows heaven is watching. And heaven rewards in silence what the world overlooks. Her strength is found in consistency, not popularity. She rises early. She endures pressure. She overcomes obstacles, not for praise, but because she understands the assignment. She is too busy birthing destiny to be distracted by who is clapping or who is criticizing. This kind of woman cannot be stopped by opinions, because she is rooted in revelation. She is not seeking a moment of applause. She is building a legacy. Her name may not be trending, but her obedience is shifting generations. The absence of applause does not discourage her. It liberates her. She no longer needs noise to move forward. She moves in silence, and yet the impact echoes loudly. Spiritual independence breeds emotional discipline and divine focus. When a woman becomes spiritually independent, she no longer relies on others to sustain her relationship with God. She no longer needs someone to constantly confirm what she already hears from heaven. Her walk with God becomes personal, deep, and anchored. She draws from her own well, not someone else's bucket. And out of that independence comes a new kind of strength, a disciplined, balanced, and focused life that is no longer driven by impulse or emotion. Emotional discipline is the byproduct of spiritual maturity. When a woman is spiritually grounded, she learns to master her emotions instead of being mastered by them. She doesn't overreact to rejection or panic in delay. She doesn't attach her worth to every changing mood or fleeting feeling. She knows how to sit still, how to wait, how to endure. She doesn't speak out of frustration or make decisions out of desperation. Her emotions are real, but they are no longer her master. They serve her purpose. With spiritual independence comes divine focus. She is no longer tossed back and forth by every voice and every opinion. She knows the sound of God's voice, and she follows it with clarity. This focus keeps her from being distracted by counterfeit opportunities or emotionally exhausting relationships. She discerns quickly, responds wisely, and stays on course even when the road is lonely. This woman's spiritual independence is not isolation. It is consecration. It's the realization that in order to fulfill her assignment, she cannot afford to be emotionally entangled with every situation. She carries peace within, not because life is easy, but because her spirit is aligned. And that alignment brings discipline, strength, and a focus that no storm can shake and no praise can distort. A woman who needs no validation lives from a well that the world cannot touch. She draws her strength, her worth, and her direction from a source that is not external, but eternal. She is not motivated by the opinions of others, nor is she shaken by their absence. Her identity is anchored in something deeper than applause and far more stable than human approval. She is not waiting for someone to fill her cup. Her well is internal, and it flows from divine intimacy with God. Because of that, she walks in a quiet authority that does not scream, yet commands attention. This kind of woman moves with grace and boldness, not because of who surrounds her, but because of who sustains her. She no longer searches for mirrors in people's faces. She reflects the image of God within herself. The world cannot define her because the world did not design her. And when people try to diminish her, they only reveal their inability to recognize value that is heaven-born. Living from a well the world cannot touch makes her invincible to emotional manipulation. She is not flattered by shallow compliments, nor broken by cheap criticism. Her joy is not dependent on the environment. Her peace is not tied to circumstances. She is stable because her source is stable. Her strength does not run dry because it flows from an unending river of divine truth, not from seasonal opinion. This woman's presence carries weight because she is full not of ego, but of essence. She doesn't chase attention, she embodies purpose. She doesn't seek the spotlight, she carries light. And that light comes from within, lit by the one who formed her. Because she no longer needs the world to tell her she matters, she becomes a force the world cannot ignore. The most powerful transformation a woman can undergo is not outward, it is inward. It is the shift from needing to be seen to knowing she is sent, from waiting to be chosen to walking as appointed. When a woman no longer seeks validation, she becomes validation. She is no longer shaped by culture, opinion, or applause. She is shaped by purpose, carved by calling, and anchored in identity. That woman is unshakable, unmovable, and undeniable. She does not compete, she completes. She does not chase, she attracts. She does not fear solitude, she thrives in it. Because she has discovered the truth. When you know who you are in God, the silence of man only makes his voice louder. You don't need a stage to be impactful, and you don't need a crowd to be powerful. You only need alignment, because the most dangerous woman on earth is not the one who is loudest, but the one who is most certain of who she is. And that woman changes everything.